get started. Welcome, everyone. I assume people are in now, we have quorum, as they would say, and people will continue to trickle in. So I want to kick this off by saying welcome, welcome, welcome to the next in our series of online classes here at Cheese Teak. My name is Jill Erber, and I'm the owner of Cheese Teak, and I'm going to be guiding you through our topic this evening, which is cloth-bound cheddars. Also known as my husband's worst nightmare. So for those of you out there who are unaware, cheddar cheese is the least favorite cheese of my wonderful husband. And despite my endless attempts at bringing home various cheddars for him to try, I have almost yet to find a cheddar that he says is good. He is like, yeah, still don't like that one. Yeah, I'm like, honey, this is literally the best cheddar in the world. And he's like, yeah, it's okay. That's not my thing. It's just not my thing. So he just doesn't like cheddars. And tonight I told him that not only is he going to taste all of them, but he's going to taste all of them twice in an attempt to be very thorough with his tasting. So I want to welcome you all to class. And really excited to go ahead and kick off here. Let me explain to you a little bit about the format that we're going to be expecting. And then we're going to jump right into what we call our shout outs, where we say hello and howdy to people out in the ether. So the way the class is going to work tonight is we are going to first, because why not, we're going to learn about and taste our delicious Cabernet Sauvignon from the amazing winemaking nation of Chile. So we're going to taste our wine. We're going to learn a little bit about it. We're going to taste our first cheese. So we kind of get the tracks greased here. And then we're going to take a step back and we're going to learn about what makes a cheddar cheese. What does it really mean to be a cheddar? And what very special specific steps are involved in a cheese being a cheddar versus any other kind of cheese. So we have lots of graphics for you. I even have a video so that you can learn a little bit more about the cheddaring process. And then from there, we will come back and taste the remaining 4 cheeses in our set here. If anyone has any questions, you should all see the handy dandy chat box there. I see Jeff over there typing sort of vigorously. So I assume that people are chiming in with questions. Please do that. It makes it really, really fun. Put those in there. Jeff will pass along as many questions or comments as he can to me, but also a really wonderful kind of community gets formed there where the attendees, all of you, will answer one another's questions and share comments and laugh together. And it's super, super fun. So that's it. Beautiful. Are we ready to proceed?
I think you
into
are.
Cheddarland?
We have some shout outs.
We do have 2 shout outs actually. The first is to Kate Stevenson in snowy Park City, Utah.
Ooh.
I know, right?
Jealous.
Lucky Kate. And this is from your daughter, Susie, sending her love. And I know we shipped you a cheese kit way out there into Utah. So thank you for being a recipient of said cheese kit. Our second shout out is to Lucy and Tommy, wishing you a Merry Christmas from Anna and Will. So ho, 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 Merry Christmas to you, Lucy and Tommy. And those are the 2 shout outs for tonight.
Excellent.
As always, I've got my husband, Jeff, here with me in the class, as I mentioned earlier, and he will be manning the dashboard. So again, he'll be chit-chatting with me throughout the class, sharing questions with me, and making his own lively commentary. Right, hon?
Lively. That's
lively.
That's
lively, but succinct.
Oh.
Okay, wonderful. So go into our wine. I want some wine. It's like whatever. It's Thursday. Almost feels like Friday. Let's have some wine.
Okay.
Like I wait for Friday ever, please. Okay, so we are going to be enjoying, for those of you that got the wine, which was almost all of you, we are going to be enjoying a really outstanding Cabernet Sauvignon blend from Chile, which is, as you might know, a nation in South America. And not only is it a nation in South America, it is one of the most interestingly shaped nations in South America, or in the world for that matter. Chile is a little tiny sliver along the west coast of South America. And Chile is about 2,600 miles north to south, and it averages about, wait for it, 100 miles across. So it's shaped, it's like a pencil. So there are some parts of Chile that are actually only 9 miles across.
So for reference, 2,600 miles across is almost about what it would be from east to west United States.
I think that's around, yeah, I think it's in the high 2s. Yeah, high mid 2s. So think of something that is, as I think you got what he was saying. So basically super, super long, super, super skinny. It is bordered, the nation of Chile, I should say, is bordered on the east of that nation by the enormously tall Andes Mountains. And that is what delineates Chile from Argentina. So Argentina also borders the Andes Mountains, but in Argentina, the mountains are on the west, and in Chile, they are on the east. What this means for Chilean wine, much like Argentinian wine, is you're going to get a pretty cool climate. You're going to get obviously high altitude, which is going to give you lots of sunshine, very, very bright, very, very dry, long summers in Chile. They have a brief sort of rainy winter, but overall their growing season is incredibly robust and incredibly supportive of heartier grapes that grow there, one of which is Cabernet Sauvignon. And that is what we are going to be enjoying this afternoon, evening, day, today with you. So this is the La Postole.
It's like a DJ scratching.
Yeah, it's I cannot be responsible for anything that I say during this class, I'll tell you that. So this is the La Postole. So this is a family that actually hails from France originally. And the founder of this winery in Chile is actually, her full name, her full last name is Madeira La Postole. So Madeira, for those of you that are like, oh, what is that? Oh no, Marnier, not Madeira, sorry. See, I told you I couldn't be responsible. Marnier La Postole, famous family producer of Grand Marnier. So she comes from a long, generations long lineage of wine and spirit production in France. Went to Chile just like on a trip once and thought, this climate is unbelievable. This soil is unbelievable. I would bet you that wine would just prosper in this area. The grapes would do really, really great. And she was right. So they founded La Postole in Chile, and it has just become one of the preeminent wine producers in that entire country. But so it's kind of a cool story.
Not too long ago, right? The midnight.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a really, really, really neat story. The wines from La Postole are very famous for their micro terroirs, as they would refer to them, which means every tiny little specific plot is so varied that they can claim to have really specific terroir or sort of a sense of place from each teeny tiny little plot. And it has a lot to do with the very frequent fluctuations in altitude, with the frequent fluctuations in soil composition, in moisture, and all of these things will affect how the grapes grow, how they taste, and of course the resulting wine. So Chile is really, really special like that because the geology there is so varied and so extreme that, again, even a tiny distance away, you can have a very, very different experience for your grapes that are growing there. And one of the really cool things they have is this is the Cuvée Alexander, which comes from one of their very specific little plots, which is one of the very few plots in the entire nation that is north-south facing. And you might say, why is that? That's very odd. Think back to what we talked about with regard to the Andes. The Andes run north-south. So the hills, the slopes are all facing east and west. So for you to get a significant plot that is facing north and south, exposing you to more intense sunshine during the day, it's going to be really, really valuable. And the grapes really, really appreciate that. So this is grown in one of those very, very special north-south facing plots.
Can we look at the plot or one of the plots?
Yes, absolutely. So go ahead and put up the beautiful picture that we have of the winery there, which is absolutely, it's just so stunning. So what you'll see is the vineyard itself is located in relatively a plain, essentially, and it is surrounded by very high hills on all sides and then a river down on the south. And then you can see kind of the Andes there.
It's funny, but for the green in the, I assume those are grapevines there, it almost looks like a desert.
It is, it's extraordinarily arid. Yeah, so it's very high, it's very dry. Think of sort of like a Santa Fe type
That's
of
exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, so that's what you're thinking of here. It's like high desert. Is it essentially?
So what is the elevation?
Ooh,
I stumped you.
You did stump me. It's super, super high. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's like mega high, thousands of feet above sea level.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a pretty amazing place in the world. So I think we should taste this now. This wine is aged 14 months in French oak. So it's going to have a little bit of oak kiss on it. Very, very subtle. Only a small percentage of the oak is new oak. So it's about 17%, I think, is new oak. And the rest is second, third, and fourth use. So when we talk about aging in oak barrels that are second, third, and fourth use, it means you're not really going to be imparting an oaky flavor from those barrels any longer. It's just going to give you a wonderful sense of structure and complexity in the wine, but not an oakiness per se. So you'll find this to be very, very subtle in the oak department. but very ripe, luscious flavors. Look at that color. It's so inky. I love it.
So the report I'm getting from Bobby and Dave Lebecki,
Yeah, hey
is
guys.
that Libby was just as good as me, which probably means she was quite a bit better.
She was fabulous. And she had kind of a stressful time there where I had some technical difficulties too, and she was a rock star. But yes, here's your sweetie. So what we want to notice about this wine is the extremely inky color. And this is no surprise for those of you that drink a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon is known for sort of its deep, robust colors. And the skins of Cabernet Sauvignon tend to be pretty thick. It's a pretty hearty grape. And therefore it imparts a lot of color to the wine when it sits in the juice with the skins. So this wine spends about 3 to 5 weeks sitting on the skins in fermentation before it is put into the oak barrels to age. So that's a really long period of time and will impart a lot of deep color, a lot of robust flavor, and a really dynamic level of tannins in this wine.
Yeah, you can definitely taste tannins. It's excellent. So I have a question. Should I wait or should I ask the question? So it seems like this is a big wine to match up with cheese.
It is.
What's the story there?
So when we're talking about pairing wine and cheese, we're always looking for kind of a meeting in the middle with regard to intensity. You don't want to pair a very mild cheese with a very strong wine. You also would not want to pair a very strong cheese with a very mild wine. Not necessarily that they will taste bad together, but that one will completely overpower the other. So typically when we have a very robust cheese like these, you can pair them with more robust wines. And these cheddars are very, very tangy, very sharp, aged for a very long period of time. They tend to have pronounced salt and a very rich, robust flavor that partners really well with your bigger red wines. In this case, the Cabernet.
Okay, so if someone was to use the
it
word,
has such a wonderful finish, that wine.
it is, yeah.
I'm like still tasting it.
Yeah.
So good.
It's excellent lip smacking.
Thank you.
If one were to use the term meaty to describe a cheese,
Yes.
would this be the kind of cheese?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Category
So
group to
yeah,
do?
absolutely. So the words meaty, brothy, savory,
Frothy.
umami is a word that is very much thrown around with regard to cheddars. They are savory, and don't confuse savory necessarily with just a saltiness. It's not just salty. Savory is sort of a rich, salty. It's more synonymous with umami than it is with just, oh, it's salty. And so that's why these cheeses are they have very big personalities, and they're going to pair well with a big wine like this. This wine is 86% Cabernet Sauvignon, 9% Cabernet Franc, 4% Carmenere, and 1% Petit Verdot. So all of those grapes are going to contribute something a little bit subtle, a little bit different, especially when you get down to that little teeny tiny amount of Petit Verdot, which is just going to add a little bit of floral quality to your wine. It's going to help to round out. Cabernet Sauvignon can be very rough, very sort of strong. And so you will often find it with other grapes mixed in to help to soften those edges and help kind of the flavors to open up a little bit. So you're not like a smack in the face.
Awesome.
Any questions about the wine before we proceed?
Let's taste this Lincolnshire poacher.
It's Lincolnshire.
And is it poacher or is it poacher?
Touche.
Eh.
So this is Lincolnshire Poacher, our first cheese here. I have mine, and it has this at least my sections, it is the most yellowy and buttery of the 5 cheeses. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Before you dig into the,
sure.
How do you say it?
Lincolnshire Poacher.
Before you dig into the Lincolnshire, tell us why you organized the cheeses in the order that you did.
Yes, so we always do our best to organize the cheeses, mildest to strongest. A lot of times when you get the cheeses, they will taste, subtly a little bit different. So I decided to do these a little bit more just the way I wanted to do it. These are all going to be fairly similar with regard to intensity. The Lincolnshire Poacher, just because it's such a unique style of cheese, what's famous about Lincolnshire Poacher, what's unique about it, I should say, is it's not just a cheddar. The way that this cheese is produced is a lot of people will compare it to almost a hybrid between a West County, which is the term for these English cheddars, a West County cheddar, and an Alpine cheese, like a Comté, for instance, or a Beaufort, something like that. So it's going to have some of those nutty notes, but it's also going to have all the tang of a cheddar. So it kind of sets it apart. So I wanted that one to be first so that we could really taste those two spirits together. And then next, I wanted to do the goat cheddar because it's going to be relatively mild compared to the others. And then we're following that with one of my favorite cheddars in the world, which is Montgomery's cheddar. That one is being followed by, we're then hopping to the United States. So our first three are all English, then hopping to the United States. Bluemont is the next one. The reason that comes after Montgomery's is because the producer here trained at Montgomery's. And so I thought it would be an interesting transition to go from Montgomery's to Bluemont. And then we're finishing up with the Cabot Clothbound Black Label because it's aged for a really long time and it's very robust.
Black Label like Johnny Walker?
Black label, yes, basically, yes. It's a label that is put on cheeses to indicate a select subset of the cheese. So you'll often see the term black label. So for instance, Bailey Hazen Blue is a blue cheese that has a black label version. It just means that it's a certain sort of excellent specimen of the cheese that they will hold back from release and allow it to age even longer to allow the really special flavors to further develop. And so that's what we have here. So those of you that have had Cabot Clothbound before, and you're like, oh, I've had that. You've probably not ever had Cabot Clothbound Black Label. It's very, 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 very rare. And we were able to get our hands on one wheel of it for the class. So it's pretty exciting. So that's kind of the order. It was really more of story order as opposed to intensity of flavor order, because you're not going to find these to be vastly different from one another as far as intensity goes.
So Kate Stevenson in Snowy.
Yes, Snowy Park City, Utah. Yes.
Says that she's a Bret. I guess she says.
I could tell because your daughter referred to you as her mom.
Yeah. Okay.
I knew right away.
And so she says you pronounce Lincolnshire quite nicely.
Lincolnshire.
Sure. Yeah. And I don't pronounce
so
it quite nicely.
The Lincolnshire, people are always like, okay, first of all, I will just put this out there: English cheeses, and not only English, but UK cheeses, so Irish cheeses, Scottish cheeses, Welsh cheeses, English cheeses. They have the coolest names in the world. I would put up English cheese names or UK cheese names up against any cheeses in the world. And this is one of just, you're like, what is that? What is a Lincolnshire poacher? And it is a very old folk song in that part of the country. And so that's why they named the cheese after that. And I would sing the song for you. I did listen to it performed multiple times earlier today. And I thought I would sing a couple bars. And then I decided nobody wants to hear me sing an old English folk song.
All right,
so I won't do that.
I'm sure everybody else has already tasted it, but let's taste it. Let's see if you found cheddar that I like.
Okay. Okay, so here is our first. And what you should notice, at least with my piece, again, everyone's piece is going to be a little bit different. You should notice a beautiful kind of crumbly aspect to a cheese like this. These cheddars are all made in the same style, meaning that they are truly cheddared. And I'll get into what that actually means. But what that results in is a texture that when you break it, it actually cracks along these sort of predefined little fissures in the cheese, which is where the pieces of the curd have met when they're aging. So for those of you out there, although why would you be doing this class if you're not a big cheddar fan, but for those of you out there who can sometimes find cheddars to be cheddary, I do find this to be a beautiful, has a nuttiness to it, a mellowness, a little bit of a sweetness, and that texture has a chewiness to it that is just divine. Love it. I'm gonna taste it with my wine. What questions do we have, Jeff?
Well, we've got Just Bobby and Dave O'Backy joking about you singing.
They've probably heard me sing before.
They're joking. They said it's got to be somebody's birthday for you soon.
Yeah.
Amy and Mark said the wine just works spectacularly with this cheese.
Oh, it really does.
So
the beautiful combination, if I do say so myself.
Just Bobby says grayish vein running through his.
Yes, you got a vein.
Is that
yes.
a mold injection?
Mm-hmm. No, it's not a mold injection, but all of these cheeses, because they are what we call cloth wrapped or bandage wrapped cheddars, they will get molds, like a lot of mold that will grow on the exterior of the cheese. And sometimes that mold can permeate the cheese just a little bit. So some of you, especially Montgomery's, our third cheese here, is very famous for having veins of what appear to be blue veins or sometimes a gray veins running through them. And Bobby, it sounds like your Lincolnshire poacher has a little bit of veining going on. Totally, totally normal, totally edible. If you got it, it's like, I don't know, kind of winning the cheese lottery. It's a super, super cool thing, and it is absolutely a feature. It is not a flaw. So if anyone out there has a little vein of blue or gray running through their cheddar, yay you win the cheese prize. So that's obviously.
Lloyd and Marcia want to know if I like this one, and I would say, I think this is okay.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I love the cheddar. I just am like, I don't.
Oh, I know. I've heard every response.
That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
The nuttiness is so. Maybe you actually did some like subliminal like planting in my mind when you were talking about it. The fact that it was partially alpine, but
yeah, it's pretty outstanding. Made in teeny tiny batches. It's aged for anywhere from 14 to 16 months. It is made from unpasteurized cow's milk, which is one of the reasons that you get that delightful texture, and you get such complex flavor that it has a finish just like this wine does. The flavors just continue and they develop and they open up. And I promise you, even though I know you all took your cheeses out and you let them come to room temperature first, I hope, but when we even loop around at the end of this class and you taste this cheese again, it will taste different to you. It's like a miracle how cheese will open up and develop. It is just like wine, that the longer it sits open, the more its flavors can open up and become more and more interesting all the time. So it's just an outstanding cheese.
Couple questions about the jam chutney.
Yeah.
Why did you choose it?
So chutney and cheddar are like this. Okay, so very traditional accompaniment. Chutney is a very traditional sort of English condiment. And the great thing about chutneys is that they are both sweet and savory at the same time. They can sometimes even have a little bit of spice to them. And the richness and the robustness of this condiment pairs beautifully with the cheeses. So what you would do is just take a piece of whatever cheese you happen to be eating at that time, take a nice little piece, put a dollop of the chutney on there. This is a mango chutney made actually in Virginia, in Flint Hill, Virginia. I mean, that's so good. I'm gonna taste it with wine too. Oh, please do that. Please do that. Please do that. Brings out like the clove and the chutney. It's so good. Okay, so that's the chutney. Pair it with any of these at any time. And then we have crackers, just because sometimes people like a cracker, but I'll be honest, highly recommend you just taste these cheeses straight without a cracker. You can really taste the differences between them. It'll make a really fun experiment.
Okay, so you said that chutney is a traditional English condiment. I would have thought it was Indian. Is that some kind of issue with the colonial aspect of India?
Yes, it's perhaps one of the very few bright sides of colonialism was chutney coming back to England and becoming an English condiment.
So
yes,
it originally
originates.
Indian.
Yes, it originates in that part of the world where there's like the heavy spices and that sort of thing, and then was just incorporated into the English culture.
Say the name one more time of the chutney maker.
Virginia chutney. That's the name. That's it. Virginia chutney. Yeah, in Flint Hill. Wonderful, wonderful products.
Okay, a couple questions about the rinds. They're edible.
The rinds are technically edible, y'all. That being said, I'm not like a big fan of eating these rinds. They taste very earthy. They will add some texture, but it's not particularly awesome texture. I don't really enjoy the rinds on these, but you can certainly, they won't harm you to eat them. It's just, they're not particularly yummy to me.
What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, Dave, jump in there and tell me what you think.
So Audrey Davis got a blue vein in her.
Yay, Audrey. Hello. Cool. Congratulations on your blue vein. All right, any other comments or questions before we talk about
Amy and Mark?
I know, right? Any more questions before we talk about what it is to be a cheddar? Because I really want to be able to spend a couple minutes on this.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Jeff, if you don't mind putting up our graphic of the cheddar steps, please, because this is the reason that I want to share this with you. I'm going to have my version here so I don't miss anything. The reason that I want to share this is about.
Yeah, I gotta make sure it's the one that's being. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Okay, great. So the reason I want to share this with you is I want you to really get a grasp for the complexity and the work and the love that goes into making this style of cheese. Not just cheddar, but a cave-aged, well, a lot of times a cave-aged, bandage-wrapped cheddar. super, super amazing. Lots of work that goes into them. So like all cheeses, we start with our milk. And these cheeses, we have a couple that are pasteurized and we have 3 that are unpasteurized. So you can make cheddar from either pasteurized or unpasteurized milk. We're going to add some starter cultures to it, which are bacteria that are going to help the milk to sour really quickly. All cheese has to be made from sour milk, not from fresh milk. If you make cheese from fresh milk, it would be kind of flavorless and unexciting. So we want the milk to go sour, but we want it to happen pretty quickly. So we're going to kind of push it along by adding in some extra bacteria cultures. And then we're going to add something to it called rennet, which is a coagulant. And what that's going to do is going to cause all of the solid matter that is floating within the milk to seize up and coagulate and stick together. And that stuck together mass is what we refer to as cheese curd. And that is what will be turned into the cheese. And then what is left over is a liquid called whey. And the whey can be used for a number of other things. It can be turned into, like, if you ever see those whey protein drink things like in the GNC,
sure.
You know, those massive whey powder, that's from that. You can use it to fertilize crops. You can use it to feed your livestock. It's very high in protein and nutrients. So there's lots and lots of uses for whey. So, but what we want when we're making cheese is we want the solid matter all stuck together. And so we're going to then, once that is done and it looks kind of like a big vat of white Jello, we're going to cut it all up into small pieces with wires or knives of some sort. And we're going to stir it. And at this point, you've got to picture that the curd pieces that you've cut up, so they look like kind of like pieces of jello-y kind of bubble gum, and they're still floating in all of that whey. So it's like soup. So you're going to take a big paddle and you're going to stir it and you're going to heat it. And this is one of the big first steps of where we separate off to making a cheddar, is that stirring process and that heating process. It's heated to over 100 degrees, but not much over 100, 102. And it's called scalding the curd. Obviously 100-degree water is not scalding to a human being, but to a cheese curd, that's pretty warm water. And it's one of the first steps in making a cheddar be so unique. And it makes it such a hearty, robust, long-lived cheese. So it can be aged for a really long time. It doesn't go bad. It's basically the world's toughest cheese, or one of them.
Let me interrupt you just for a second. So
sure.
Go back. I just want to make sure I understand exactly where the fork occurs, where it's now the cheddar process versus
right. So we a lot of cheeses will be made by stirring curd and cooking it. Okay. For instance, Goudas are made the same way. So they will stir and cook a curd. But this is one of the key differences of where we begin to branch off.
Not all cheeses do that, but
some cheeses other than cheddar
will
do that. So our Venn diagram is getting a little bit more tight as we go forward here. So we then are going to, after we've stirred this for maybe a half hour, 45 minutes or so, we're going to drain. So a lot of these huge cheese vats, they have a drain at the bottom, and they'll unhook it, and the whey will all drain out into a drainage pipe. And we then just have the solid bits left over, which are still very moist, but they're solid. And we're going to allow them to rest for a little while until they kind of start to clump up and stick together. So picture now that we have this one huge mass of cheese curd bits and pieces kind of stuck all together. And the longer we let it sit, the longer we let it rest, the more it will begin to knit together in a sense and make more of a solid mass. And then this next step is really the magic of where a cheddar is made. And this is a process called, strangely enough, cheddaring. So cheddar is the name of a town in England. It's in Somerset, and it is supposedly where the cheddar cheese was invented. So it is a town, it is a cheese, cheddar, and it is also a technique for making said cheddar cheese. And the cheddaring process is this very unique process where that knitted together curd is cut into slabs, and then those slabs are layered one upon each other as the cheese kind of rests there. And it helps to press out more whey, and it helps the curd to sort of moosh together and stick together again. And we actually have a quick little video of the cheddaring process. If you're able to play that, it's a hard thing to describe, and just something that I really want you all to be able to see. And I'm gonna hop over there so I can see what is what's going. Can you turn that just a teensy bit?
Yeah,
okay.
Go.
Yep. All right, so what you see here is the gentleman flipping over these pieces of the cut up curd. Okay, can we see this? So he's actually flipping. Now he's starting to stack those slabs of curd on top of one another. And there's various typos in this person's text, but you get the idea. So there's this multiple stacking that's happening. And this can happen over a couple hour period. And the cheeses are flipped and rotated about every 15 minutes. And not only are they piled on top of one another, but they're actually turned over as well. So you can see he's kind of starting to finish up this process here.
There's cloth in there.
He's got cloth there at the beginning. And this is a really cool part for y'all to see. So this is, if you watch the cheddaring process, you can see, this is time lapse, where the cheese begins to flatten and soften and kind of knit together under the, you can stop that now, under the
end result should be a chicken breast-like texture. That's what it said.
Yeah, I know.
That was it.
I found that somehow disturbing. I don't know why. But anyway, so that is the magical cheddaring process. And again, it's so hard to describe. I think the video really helps to illustrate it. But it is that process that separates a cheddar from a non-cheddar. And there are lots of cheddars that cheat and they don't use the cheddaring process. They'll still call themselves cheddar, but they don't use that cheddaring process because I think you can see how time-consuming and how labor-intensive that
so
is.
Like craft cheddar doesn't do that?
No. So after that process is complete and we have these hunks of the curd that has kind of settled and a little bit of fermentation is happening, pH is changing, it's starting to get a little tangy. We're going to then, you can put that other graphic back up. Okay. We're going to take those slabs and we're going to put them through a cheese mill, which is literally like a grinder. Some places use like a French fry cutter to do it. You know, where you put the potato in, jam it, and they'll use something like that. So it just turns these larger pieces into smaller kind of finger-sized pieces of curd that are then mixed with salt. And the reason we cut them into those smaller pieces is so that when we mix the salt in, it's uniformly applied. It doesn't, you don't get these big beds of salt and hunks of salt. And then we are going to add these to our, what we call our forms or our cheese molds that are going to give the cheeses their shapes. And I actually have a picture of that from our Lincolnshire cheesemaker. If you want to pop that up, it's called Filling the Forms or something to that effect. And you can see how they will actually line the cheese forms with the cheesecloth, and then they will put those curds in there. And I think it's a really cool illustration of how that process works. Were you able to get that one up?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So you can see there they've got the forms, the cheese molds, and they're lined with the cheesecloth that's kind of overflowing over the edge. They're filling that with those finger-sized pieces of curd. They're going to mush them down and press them, and then they're going to wrap that cheesecloth around there. And that is the wrapping process. We're going to then allow the cheese to stay like that for a couple days until it will hold its shape. And then we begin the aging process of these cheeses. So as you can imagine, in the beginning of the process, the cheeses are very tender, they're very squashy. So we have to make sure that we're rotating them and flipping them super, super frequently, or you would end up with like a bell-shaped, piece of cheese. So they get flipped at least once a day in the beginning and rotated, and all of this. It's incredibly, incredibly time consuming, especially when you think about a cheese that is aged anywhere from a year to 18 months. That's a lot of flipping and turning. And it makes all the difference in the world as far as making a cheddar that is cloth wrapped like that. The cloth creates this wonderful barrier, which is then rubbed in most cases in lard. And the lard makes this sort of like this wonderful barrier that helps to keep the moisture in. But then as the molds begin to colonize on the outside of the cheese, they gobble up all of that lard to the point where they've eaten up all the lard, and the mold can then proliferate on the rind, the cloth itself. And that's where it will start to actually go into the cheese a little bit and affect the flavor of the cheese. And so this is why sometimes you'll see those the veins running through there, is because that's just a section where the mold had gotten to the cheese and kind of infiltrated in a little crevice there. So again, these cheeses are aged for typically a long time because they tend to be really, really big wheels, and because they're wrapped in the cheesecloth and the lard, they take a long time for all of that moisture to leave, and it's intentional because we want the flavors of these cheeses to be able to fully develop over a very long period of time.
By a long time, a year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, we got a couple questions.
Ask away.
Susie Stevenson has
Yes.
two. She
Sure.
wants to clarify, when you said 100 degrees, you mean Fahrenheit?
I do mean
Yeah.
Fahrenheit. Yes, not Celsius. That would be like the sun. Well, not really. It would be really hot though.
So, okay, she also noticed that people were not wearing gloves when they were flipping them. Does stuff in their hands contribute? Doesn't have any kind of like positive effect? I don't know.
No,
bacteria?
there would not be any positive effect from it, and there would not be any negative effect either. So these cheeses age for such a long period of time, and there's so much bacteria living in there and molds on the outside, that any sort of human involvement and touching in that process would be just negated very, very quickly.
Okay.
Yep.
And then
You do want clean hands, though, for sure.
another question about the cheese making process from Amy and Mark. They would like to know, can good cheese be made from microbial rennet? I'm not sure.
Microbial?
Microbial. I don't know. How
You
to
just said the
speak.
word microbial,
I just read it.
right? So microbial rennet. And the question, I got so hung up on that, was the question, can you make good cheese with microbial rennet? Was that the question? Yes.
If that's how you want to pronounce it, sure.
Okay, so excellent question. Microbial rennet is another word for sort of a vegetarian rennet. So rennet naturally is extracted from the stomach lining of an animal. And it's not like no animal is sacrificed just for rennet, right? It's animals that are being sacrificed for other purposes. And one of the things that we can gain from that is rennet to make cheese. And it's a very ancient way of making cheese. Cheese purists, traditional cheesemakers really like to use what's called animal rennet when they're making their cheeses. They will claim that the texture is more supple, that the flavors are more interesting. It brings out a more sort of a better end result. But there are some that don't like the idea of eating the animal rennet, and so they prefer to have what's called microbial rennet cheeses or vegetarian rennet. And vegetarian rennet can be derived from various plants. Very commonly is one is called a thistle, which is exactly, we've probably all seen a thistle plant. Well, we can derive vegetarian rennet from that. There are those that would claim that, oh, vegetarian rennet doesn't make as robust and delicious of a cheese. I think most people probably would not be able to tell the difference between the two. From the cheesemaker's perspective, however, working with animal rennet is much more unpredictable. So you have to really know what you're doing, and you have to be prepared for and frankly appreciate inconsistency in your cheese. And a lot of these cheeses are like that with everything that they do, but they would consider the differences between batches and executions of this cheese to be one of the beauties of the cheeses, that every milking is going to taste different, and the cheese made from that milking is going to be different. The moisture content is going to be different with every batch. So many things will affect the resulting flavors. So yes, I think great cheese can be made from vegetarian rennet, like for sure.
And it sounds like in the modern day that it's actually quite common.
Oh, very, very common. Yeah. Yes, to use the vegetarian rennet. It's more predictable, it's less expensive, it's easier to acquire, it's typically shelf stable. So all of these things will, make it.
So like the small batch, more artisanal
Exactly.
cheeses probably still use the animal, but
Yeah, but a lot of very famous, massive producers still use animal rennet too. Parmigiano Reggiano is made with animal rennet. So and that's one of the biggest cheeses produced. In order to be called Parmigiano Reggiano, you have to be made with animal rennet. So yeah.
All right. Morgan Smith wants to know,
Yes.
At what point in the cheese making process does refrigeration start to come into play?
So by refrigeration, instead of refrigeration, I will refer to it as cooling. And the reason that I refer to it as cooling is because these cheeses go back, cheddar specifically goes back over 700 years. So clearly it was made quite successfully for hundreds of years before refrigeration. But it does require cooling. So as you're aging a cheese, it can't be too warm. And the way that they would achieve cooling is they would age their cheeses in actual caves. And a number of these cheeses are aged underground in actual caves. And they will maintain a really consistent temperature of about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the ideal temperature for aging a cheese. It's not so cold that you're kind of shutting down the bacterial processes, but it's not so warm that you get rot and over ripening. So you want about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and caves will also have very high humidity. So if you picture an environment, for those of you that have been in an actual cave before, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You walk in, it's dank and cold and humid. And that's exactly what the environment is where a cheese ages the best. And it's really the aging process where you want that coolness. But again, this has been done for hundreds of years and very often underground for that very reason.
Wonderful. Let's say some Wookie, or how do you pronounce that?
You can say Wookie if you
Wookie
want.
hole?
So I think, again, just back to the English cheeses have the best names ever. This is the Wookie hole goat cheddar. So this is a 100% goat's milk cheddar. And for those of you who are looking down at your collection of cheeses and you're like, wow, that cheese is really white compared to the other cheeses on my board, the answer is yes. That is, or not answer, but yes is my response, because goat's milk is naturally a pure white color. Goats, whether they lack the enzyme to break down beta carotene. It's something about the eating of the grass, and either the goats have the enzyme or they don't have the enzyme. But regardless, their milk is very bright white, whereas cow's milk is more yellowy in color. So you can really tell as these cheeses are aged which one is the goat's milk cheese. It's super, super
Dave,
bright white.
Farmer Dave.
Yes, Farmer Dave, help me. Which is it?
Do the goats have the enzyme or do they not have the enzyme?
It's either they can break it down and that's why you don't see it in the milk, or they can, I don't remember. Anyway, so this is Wookie Hole goat's milk cheddar. Can you put up our
Yes.
beautiful, beautiful photograph of the Wookie Hole caves in Somerset, England? This cheese is made in Dorset, England, but is aged, Jeff, here's yours,
Oh, wow, these caves.
but is aged in Somerset, just a little bit to the west, in the very famous Wookie Hole caves, which are these subterranean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet under the earth surface, and they're natural caves. And they actually dedicate a portion to those caves. They have tourism there as well. You can go on tours of the caves, but they actually dedicate a portion of the caves to aging this specific cheese. It is the only cave-aged, cloth-wrapped goat's milk cheese in the entire country of England. So this is truly a one-of-a-kind cheese that you are about to enjoy here. It's sweet, chewy, springy, good salt, very mild.
I like this one better.
This one reminds me a little bit of a salty Gouda.
Exactly. That, yes. And the color looks like a Gouda.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't
Looks like
look
a
like
goat's
orange
milk
Gouda, but it
Yeah.
looks good. Yeah.
So this is just a super, such a cool
Is
cheese.
cheddar made everywhere? Liz asked once to know. She said
Right.
what other countries? It's made in the U.S. obviously.
It is.
Too.
So there's a convention, or there's rules around naming of cheeses. And they have, a protected domain of origins and protected domains or protected geographical regions. It's essentially a massive trademark thing, where if you have a cheese like Stilton, for instance, Stilton has to be made per a certain recipe in a very specific region, only one specific way, in order to be called Stilton. And it has to be certified that you're doing all of those things so that you can call your cheese Stilton. And there are many cheeses like that. So Stilton is one of them. Parmigiano Reggiano, again, is one of those. Pecorino Romano is one of those. There's hundreds and hundreds of name-protected cheeses out there in the world. And it was a way of conveying to the public, conveying to the people who are eating these cheeses, that this specific region or this specific place where this cheese is from means something. And a cheese made in this specific region will taste different than a cheese made with the same recipe from the same type of milk in another region. The land is that important to the flavor of the cheese. So lots of cheeses got on that boat and name protected. Cheddar missed that boat completely. So cheddar never did it. What this means is that you have cheddars made all over the world that can call themselves cheddar. There's no recipe designation. So a cheddar does not have to be cheddared even to be calling itself a cheddar. It doesn't have to be made from goat's milk or cow's milk or sheep's milk. You can have cheddar more reflects the style of the cheese. And as people sort of branch away from the traditional ways of making cheddars like these are made, what people expect from a cheddar is kind of a chewy but creamy, tangy cheese. And so people will make cheddars, but they will skip on all sorts of aspects of sort of the traditional English cheddars, for instance, but they can still call it a cheddar. So yes, there are cheddars made all over the world and in all kinds of different ways for that reason.
Nice. Okay. So Dave says that goats do not deposit all the beta carotene into the milk. So clarification there.
Thank you.
All right. We had a question a little bit back from Fern. She wanted to know if you can make cheese at home. And do you make cheese at home? And do we sell kits in the store to make cheese at home? And what is like mozzarella is probably the best one to make at home.
So you can absolutely make cheese at home, and there are people who make very exotic aged cheeses at home. typically when you're making a cheese at home, if you're just a beginner, you're going to be making more of a fresh style cheese. You're going to make some mozzarella, you're going to make something like ricotta or mascarpone or creme fraiche, something along those lines, because they're quick, they're easy, they don't require aging. So really the big challenge in making a cheese is aging a cheese successfully, because you really need to maintain that consistent temperature, that consistent humidity. And if you don't have those things, your cheese can go very much awry. And you can't age a cheese in a refrigerator because it's too cold. So you need to actually have a climate for aging cheese that is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit and high in humidity. And a lot of people don't have that in their homes. They can buy cellars and things, smaller cellars that they can age cheeses inside of. But there's a lot of equipment involved in that. So making a cheese that's a longer aging cheese, that's really the challenge, but you can absolutely do it. There's lots of home cheesemakers that do beautiful cheeses for sure.
Yeah.
But for the average person, you're going to be making something fresh.
And Susie mentioned and it kind of answered Fern's question that there are these kits to do it at home, but indicated that they might not be great cheese. But I think that's probably true in general. However, I think if you make mozzarella at home, it can be spectacular because it's just fresh mozzarella.
So fresh.
Just awesome. And it's not that hard to do.
It's not that hard to do. So I would say mozzarella is one that is really, really better if you make it at home even, because it's so supple and just tender and pliable when it comes right out of the water.
And we've had a couple of times where in the stores we've had mozzarella making classes.
Well, we make our own mozzarella in the kitchen all the time for our recipes, but we will sometimes do it out on the floor as well, so that people can see that process in real life.
Pretty neat.
All right, any other questions before we move on from our Wookie Whole? This is made from 100% pasteurized goat's milk, so this is not a raw milk cheese, and it's aged for anywhere from 6 to 8 months, depending on what kind of flavor profile they're going for. And when I spoke earlier about the size of these wheels of cheese, every single one of these is a really big, heavy wheel of cheese. This, just to illustrate for you, is a quarter wheel of Wookie Whole. So Wookie Whole weighs, when it is intact, weighs 56 pounds. So this is a quarter wheel, and it is massive. You see the beautiful sort of craggy surface, right, where all that curd is kind of been pressed together. And so this cheese, I don't want to put it down too hard because it will, as you can see, it's actually crumbling a little in my hand. You can see how massive and heavy this cheese is. So this piece here weighs about 20 pounds.
It really is huge.
Yeah, super, super impressive. And they tend to be these tall cylinders as well, which is really fun. They're just super beautiful.
Awesome.
I like rest my drink on there. Okay. Any other questions before we move on to one of my personal favorite cheddars in the world?
Let's do it, Montgomery.
Okay. So we're moving on to Montgomery's cheddar, which again, one of my favorite cheeses, certainly one of my top cheddars. This is made from unpasteurized organic cow's milk, and it's made in Somerset, England. So the same place where this cheese is aged, Montgomery's cheddar is made there. It's made by a gentleman named Jamie Montgomery, and he makes Montgomery's cheddar. This recipe was created and first produced by his grandfather in 1911, and so he's third generation cheesemaker now, and I think he does just an absolutely beautiful job. A wheel of Montgomery's cheddar weighs about the same as the Wookie Whole, about 56 pounds.
In the picture that we have, is that the gentleman you were mentioning? Is that him, or is it just some guy who works there? You guys look at it, see?
That's just some guy.
Just some guy.
Yeah. No. So those are just the wheels of Montgomery's cheddar. They're aging. It's just remarkable. It's so beautiful. So another really cool thing about Montgomery's cheddar, it uses a natural bacteria culture, and the strain of this bacteria is the same strain that his grandfather used. It has just been perpetuated all of these years. It's just like a sourdough culture in a sense, where it just is a living thing and you just continue to create new batches of it. So he uses the exact same critters that his grandfather used about 100 years ago, which is pretty amazing. Let me think anything else that I want to share about this one. This is, so one of the things about this style of cheddar is I hope that we have illustrated to you how complex and time consuming and frankly expensive the process of making these cheeses is. And there's really only 3 cheesemakers that still, in all of Somerset, which is a pretty big county in England, there's only 3 cheesemakers that still make their cheese in this traditional way, where they do the cheddaring and the milling and the cloth wrapping, and Montgomery's is one of them. So it's a dying art for sure, for sure. So eat your cloth wrapped cheeses, because that's what will keep them alive.
But the cloth wrap isn't necessary for it to be cheddar, right?
Oh my God, it's so good. It tastes like caramelized onions.
Somebody else said onions. Yeah,
Oh my God, that texture.
onions, meaty, crystals, meaty. There's a sourness to it that doesn't taste meaty to me, though. That's
You don't like the sourness, I think, is a lot.
That's-
It's so creamy on the palate.
because somebody else said earthy, and there's an earthiness that I like. I like
Right.
the texture.
So you'll get a lot of earthiness in these cheeses because of the cloth wrapped nature. They're cave aged. I think every single one of them is cave aged. But you will get the earthiness that comes from that cloth wrapping, which is the mold that's growing on that cloth rind. And the slow, deliberate aging results in a beautiful, pronounced earthiness.
All right, Liz has wants to know, will the label always say cloth wrap? Oh, I see. So you're looking at the cheese and it's the cloth has been taken off. And will the label tell you it was cloth wrap?
No, it will not, but I'll tell you what will. Pick up your cheese and look at the rind, and you can actually see the imprints of the cheesecloth. You can see the pattern of the cloth on the exterior of this cheese. You can see where it was pulled off. That is what will tell you if a cheese is cloth wrapped. It actually looks like cloth on the outside. So that would be something to look for. Some will incorporate Clothbound in their name, like Cabot Clothbound. Cheddar is part of its formal name, but Montgomery's Cheddar does not do that. Wookey Hole does not do that. Most of them don't say whatever cloth wrapped cheddar. But in England, they will often refer to them as bandage wrapped. But again, they're not putting that in the name necessarily.
The LaRouche family, the whole family loves this one.
It's fantastic. What's not to love? It's delicious. Make sure that you try it with the chutney, because I have a feeling that the meatiness. Do you want another bite of this, Jack? I'm not giving you a hard time, but no.
Sandra wants to know if all of these, and this is always a question in the classes, so she's asking about Shirlington, but let's talk both. Are all of these cheeses available in the shops? Shirlington, Delaware?
Right now they are.
Right now they are. Can you get them online? Are they all in the online store?
No. So as of tomorrow morning, I will have them all online. I will send you all an email tomorrow morning with links to all of these that you can purchase on our online store, and also a link to the recorded class. So a lot of people like to do the class later at night, or they like to watch it again. So I'll send you a link to all of that tomorrow morning. And so yes, all of these we definitely have right now, but we will probably never get I've never had the Wookey Hole before. Probably will never get that one again. That was a hard one to get. We'd love to carry Montgomery's, so that's kind of a staple with us. The Bluemont, we like to keep around when we can. It's hard to get. Cabot Clothbound Black Label, no. So we will sometimes have Cabot Clothbound, the regular one, but not the Black Label, the extra aged. And then the Lincolnshire Poacher, same deal. That was brought in just for the class. Super hard to get. So I would say, I'll always point out to you, like, these are the ones that we carry. Like this, the Montgomery's, we pretty much always have. Blue Mountain will have pretty often, and the Cabot Clothbound, a different version of it we will have. But the first two, no. So get those while you can if you like them.
Okay, Liz wants to clarify, does cage aged always equal cloth bound?
No, so cave aged does not necessarily mean that the cheese has been wrapped in cloth first. It's just a way of conveying a sense of authenticity and traditional cheese making. So there are cheeses that will be cave aged that are not necessarily wrapped in the cloth. Okay. But it's just, again, it's like an authentic, kind of cool, old fashioned way of aging the cheeses.
Okay. And Fern wanted to point out that the wine is just excellent with all these cheeses.
So good.
Yeah.
I know. It's delicious. The wine is opening up beautifully, by the way. So if you want to, even like before you take another bite of a cheese, like revisit that wine and taste how just beautiful it is opening up to be. Super, super happy.
This is I think, an interesting flavor descriptor,
okay.
Or analogy. Jim and Danny say that it's got a horseradish taste.
Interesting. Yeah. I wonder if that's connected to almost that sense of onion.
Yeah.
Like the moment I tasted it, it was like caramelized onions instantly. Very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, Blois LaRouche has a question about the Black Label and the first two. She wants to know why they are so hard to get.
Well, they're just very, very small production, and then they have to be selected and imported to the United States. And then it's like everyone in the United States, all the cheese shops that want a piece of this, you know, they're kind of clamoring to get them because they're pretty rare. They're pretty small production. And I'll give you just an illustration, like the Bluemont cheddar here. I think he makes about 12,000 pounds of cheese a year. Okay. A comparable large American cheddar producer, something like Tillamook. A lot of people have heard of Tillamook. I think that might have Tillamook from actually from Canada. I might remember that. Anyway, big cheddar producer. They will make about 150,000 pounds of cheese a day.
Say that one more time.
So
12,000 total for the year
12,000 for the year.
versus 100,000.
150,000 a day.
Wow.
So you're talking about such a massive difference in scale. These are just teeny tiny producers. There's just not much of the cheese. And when you talk about the Cabot Clothbound, the percentage of the Clothbound that even makes it to the black label level, because it has to be deemed of a superior quality to be allowed to become black label. They don't make black label all the time. It's only when they're like, oh my gosh, we had a very special batch, has certain special characteristics. We want that one to be further aged. So it's just unpredictable when that's going to happen.
Oregon, Morgan Smith says.
Thank you. Gosh.
Do I have my own bottle of the wine? No, I have to ask Jill for more.
Oh,
But
do you want more wine, honey?
I'm sipping slowly. I'm the
Part of
designated
my master plan.
computer operator.
There you go. All right.
Hold on, one
Yes,
more question,
no,
then we move
just
on.
great. I'm gonna eat these
Boys,
pieces.
how long can the cheese keep once? So now we've taken these big wheels, we've cut a small piece, we brought it home. We had a little bit, but we want to save some. How long?
I would say eat as much as you can tonight. If you're going to save it, don't wrap it in anything. Just put it in a lidded, like a Tupperware container or glass container that has a lid on it, and it will keep it pretty nice for another couple weeks. So try not to keep bringing it up to room temperature and then refrigerating it again and up to room temperature. So try and take out as much as you think you'll eat and then be finished. This is a lot of cheese.
A lot of cheese. Perfect. All right, Bluemont.
So
And is Bluemont blue?
it is not. It is named after the town where he lives, which is Blue Mounds, Wisconsin. So we're now leaving England. We're coming to the United States. Bluemont cheddar, named for Blue Mounds, again in Wisconsin, it's just west of Madison, Wisconsin, is made from pasteurized cow's milk and is aged for about 16 months. The reason, again, that this follows the Montgomery's cheddar is that Willie, who makes this cheese, trained under the cheesemakers under Jamie Montgomery. And so he was so in love with their technique and their process and frankly, their cheese, he came back to the United States and made it sort of his passion to create something that inspired and perfect and beautiful. And so that is what he has been striving for. He's a very eccentric guy and built from hand this amazing underground cheese cave, which is literally cut into the side of a cave. I have a beautiful photograph of it, Jeff, if you want to put that one up.
This is Bluemont.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And so this is made by Willie Lanner, whose family actually is historically Swiss cheesemakers. And so his background was in Swiss cheese. And it was only once he learned how to make Montgomery's cheddar that he became, again, so inspired. It's like, oh my gosh, I want to make this specific style of cheese here in the United States. The interesting thing about Willie is he does not own his own cows and he does not own his own cheese plant. So he borrows them. He gets milk from sort of the preeminent organic milk producers right next to his property, and he uses other people's cheese factories. So one of the places he uses, for instance, is Upland's Cheese, which is the famous producer of Pleasant Ridge Reserve, one of the most winningest American cheeses in history. So he just pops on over there and makes his cheese there. And again, he makes a teeny tiny amount of cheese and he ages it in this amazingly cool cave cut into the side.
So he owns the cave though.
Mm-hmm. He owns the cave.
He thought of all the things I'm gonna own. I don't want to own the cows, I don't want to own the cheese making machinery.
And
I'm gonna
think
own the cave.
it speaks a little bit to his eccentricity,
A little bit.
which is that he wanted to be fully immersed in the aspect of cheese making that he could control. The temperature, the humidity, but it's all natural. In other words, it stays 50 degrees in there all the time and high humidity, but it's natural because it's cut, again, underground into the side of a hill. So it's just an amazing, amazing process. But he liked the fact that the aging process he could monitor really, really closely. You know, how the milk turns out, it's a crapshoot. You know, like what were your cows up to that day? How are they feeling? How much water did they drink? What's the weather like? The quality of the milk can fluctuate such that the sort of the animal husbandry aspect of it can be very, very complicated. He trusts other people to do great milk production. And then having a cheese factory is frankly extraordinarily expensive. So he likes to just go and use other people's, and he probably gives them, I don't know, wheels of cheese in exchange or something, some sort of exotic cheese bartering system. But this is Blue Mont cheddar, considered to be one of the greatest American cheeses. Forget cheddar, just greatest American cheeses. So that's almost like the greatest American hero, but not quite.
The greatest American hero. Good reference to 80s TV.
Oh, it's got little crunchies in there. Oh, it's like caramelly. Oh man, that's good. You know, so silky and creamy on the palate, like pudding.
How many pounds does Blue Mont make?
This is the one that makes about 12,000 pounds a year.
Okay. Question. Hold on.
Good.
This has a horseradish aspect to it for sure.
I'll give you that.
Okay.
I'll give you that.
Brad and Eva.
Hey, Brad and Eva.
A real horseradish. They want to know how you go about finding all these small producers.
Can I just sip my wine super quick on the restaurant? I have the best bite in here. So, lots of reading, lots of going to cheese shows, trade shows, and frankly, partnering with really great teeny tiny vendors who find great stuff and bring it in for us. So it's a combination of things, but it's a fun process.
And it's a little bit of a network, right? Where you
for
find
sure.
people. And...
For sure. Yep. So it's knowing the right people, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Yes.
So Kate in Park City was saying that, well, you talked about storing cheese, and she said, well, Park City's really dry. And I said, don't worry about it. All refrigerators are really dry.
Yes.
So whatever Jill said is going to be about the same. She doesn't believe me, so she wants me to clear.
Well, what I'll tell you is that refrigerators are extraordinarily dry and cold and drafty. So cheese does not typically do well when stored in a refrigerator, and that it will dry out really, really quickly and become damaged. And that's why we like to really protect our cheese from the refrigerator, but we don't want to wrap it in plastic, because that will actually, cheese is a living thing, as we have discussed, and you will actually suffocate it if you wrap it in plastic. So what you want to do is create, in a sense, a little ecosystem that protects it from the harsh, dry, cold environment, which is pretty much at freezing temperature. You want to protect it from that while not suffocating it. And this is why I really love to just put mine in a Tupperware container with a lid. And it will keep a nice little level of moisture in there, and it'll protect it from all of that harshness.
But the specific environments of Park City versus Singapore or whatever is not going to be.
No, it's in the refrigerator. It's all the same. Yeah.
She says that makes sense. Should you separate each cheese?
In this case, I would not worry about separating them. If you had, for instance, a washed rind cheese that was very stinky, and then you had some other kind of cheese like this, I would definitely not store those in the same container, because the cheeses are very odor absorbent, and so they will pick up the flavors of other things. So a stinky cheese in your fridge will absorb those flavors and odors. So try and kind of segregate those a little bit if you can.
Kate, we're going to be in Park City in March, so we're going to come visit you, and we're going to
check out your refrigerator.
We're going to work on it with you. What do you say?
Shall we move on to our final cheese here? So this is our final cheese. This is another American cheddar. This is our Cabot Clothbound Black Label Select, which means that it is an extra aged version of Cabot Clothbound. Cabot Clothbound is a pasteurized cow's milk cheddar. It is aged for about 12 to 14 months, so well over a year. And the regular Cabot is aged about 8 months. So even that is aged for a really nice period of time, but this one is aged for well over a year, and is going to be just absolutely outstanding. It's a really cool cheese because it's made in partnership with a very tiny, so Cabot's a big cheesemaker, but they partner with a tiny cheesemaker called Jasper Hill Farm. A lot of you may know Jasper Hill. They make, again, Bailey Hayes and Blue. They make Harbison. They make Windermere, Willoughby, some beautiful American artisan cheeses. So the Jasper Hill folks will go to Cabot. They're both in Vermont. They will go to Cabot and they will find these batches that they think are particularly superior, and they will take those batches back they take them all. They take all of the Cabot Clothbound, but they take the ones that are very special to turn into Cabot Clothbound Black Label. So the cheese is made by Cabot but aged by Jasper Hill. And Jasper Hill will actually apply a secondary layer. They'll apply lard and a second layer of cloth on the outside when they get it to their cellars, which is really, really cool. So Jeff, this is the Cabot Clothbound cheddar.
Gina and Bobby are going to Park City March 2.
Really? That's awesome. Party. That is exceptional.
It is, and this
crunchies there.
is less sour. Why is that?
It's just the recipe, sweet.
Very
This one
sweet.
really tastes like a Gouda too. So creamy. Comes in a 32-pound wheel, so smaller than these, but still really big. Did you put up the picture of the Cabot Clothbound?
Oh, I probably did. How cool is this though? Susie Stevenson's undergraduate research advisor was the milk quality tester for Jasper Hill.
Wow, that's an interesting connection.
You, right?
I love it. Well, this one is so good.
Fern calls me the East German judge, wants to know what I think of this cheddar. That's good, Fern. I like that.
What do you think of this? You like?
I like this one too. Honestly, they were all. There were none of them that I was like, wow, I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
The first two and this last one, I think there's aspects of them that I really like.
It's almost got a smokiness to it.
Yeah, this is really good. The East German judge.
What other questions do we have, honey?
I
want to have a piece of this with this mango chutney. Can I make you a piece with mango chutney, Jeff, or no?
I'll try the mango chutney.
Yeah, okay.
Let's see. Ask some final questions, folks. Oh, I'm supposed to be putting up another.
Oh. What's the other picture?
You just told me we put up.
Oh, the Cabot Clothbound?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just stand here holding
All right.
dishes. Okay, here. That is the Cabot Clothbound with a little bit of the mango chutney on there. So why don't we put up our poll? Because I'm so curious which was the favorite cheddar. Jeff is going to put up a poll of which was your favorite, and you just have to click on there, and the 5 cheeses are listed. We've got our Lincolnshire Poacher, we've got our Wookey Hole Goat Cheddar, we've got our Montgomery's Cheddar, we've got our Bluemont Cheddar, and we've got our Cabot Clothbound Black Label Select Cheddar. And
All right.
I have no idea what is.
You have no idea. So usually you know, right?
Usually I have an idea. I think the Cabot is going to do really well. That is just delightful, and I think the Montgomery's will do really well. But I'm not certain.
Not sure how many folks. Well, we got a lot of about 2/3 of the folks who purchased the class are on right now.
Again, a lot of people like to do it later,
Yeah.
which is why I try to get that link out there as quickly as I can.
And Knox wants to vote for the chutney.
The chutney's awesome.
Is that you didn't like the cheese, or was it just the chutney was so good that you feel like she deserves is chutney, is she like boats and
All fabulous. These are
country?
chic. That's really good. So good.
The LaRouche family, there's 3 of them, and they split between the last 3.
Uh-oh.
But there's a clear winner. There's a couple folks who are on that haven't voted yet.
Okay. Well, that's okay.
I'm going to give it another few seconds.
Oh, yeah. That Cabot Clothbound with the chutney and the wine. Killer. So good. All right. Hit me. What are the results?
All right, I'm going to end the poll now,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm going to share the results, and you tell me what you think won.
I'm going to vote for the Cabot Clothbound.
Yeah, 44%.
Whoa,
Selected Cabot.
that's amazing. What were the other ones? I think the Wookey Hole came in last, would be my guess.
No, Montgomery came in last.
Montgomery's?
Wookey Hole, I would say Lincolnshire and Wookey and Montgomery were all kind of close.
Toward the bottom.
Toward the bottom.
So Bluemont was second?
Bluemont was second.
Okay. Wow, so go America, I guess, huh? Both of the American cheddars. I think the English guys would be like, it's an affront. Blimey. Say blimey, or is that a pirate? Oh, maybe
Blimey?
Blimey? I think pirates say
It might
blimey.
be like a slur in England. Jeez, don't say words you don't know what they mean.
All right. Any other questions before we wrap up our wonderful session here tonight?
Final questions, folks.
Our next class is yet to be decided, but what I will tell you is that it will not take place on New Year's Eve or close to New Year's Eve. It will not be on the 30th. So we will not be doing a class then. We will do our next class in January. And I think I'm still working on the topic. So if you have any awesome ideas, shoot them my way. Everything will be online for you. I will send you an email tomorrow with the link to all of the items, as well as the link to the recorded class. But in your handout that you all got, you should see a link in here as well, where you can go and visit to see the previous class.
So, okay, there was a question about New Year's Eve. So Shirlington, there is in-person New Year's Eve dinner.
Yes.
Delray, we're just, and like literally in the next day, finishing up some major renovations. And so.
Oh my gosh, y'all.
We've been flying the plane while, rebuilding the plane while it's flying.
Building the plane while flying it is, yes.
And so we didn't want to commit to New Year's Eve in Delray, but we do, I don't know if this is up on the website yet.
It's not yet, but we'll be doing the New Year's Eve
dinner
at home
for folks
out of Delray. And if you want to have New Year's Eve in person with us, which will be just so luxurious and fabulous, that is going to be at our Shirlington location on New Year's Eve. So that is on online now.
Yeah, and there was another question here. Oh, will we be doing a New Year's Eve Friday night cheese board?
You know what, I think
Maybe.
we will. I think we will, yes. We will be doing that. And I would love to do a Christmas Eve one. I don't know if we'll be able to get that done because I have 3 children, and 3 children at Christmas time, you don't get a lot of time to do anything other than get ready for Christmas, if you know what I mean.
We'll see.
So,
we'll do our best.
we will see. Love
All right.
Christmas. All right.
Wonderful.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays. Merry
Happy
Christmas.
holidays to all of you. And I look forward to seeing you at our next class in January. And we do have a Friday night cheese board this week, which is awesome. It's a holiday one. So go online and you'll see it there. Some beautiful holiday cheeses. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I'm so appreciative. And I cannot wait to see you all at our next class. Big holiday kisses. Stay safe. Stay happy, joyous. Yay.